For over 30 years, we've had the privilege to live and work in this great community. Kerrigan, Estes, Rankin, McLeod, and Thompson, representing accident victims across Northwest Florida.
And now, from Pensacola, Florida, it's Within Reason with Bob Kerrigan and Bill Rankin.
Well, good evening and welcome to another edition of Within Reason. My co-host.
I'm promoted to co-host.
Yeah,
That's great.
Would you introduce yourself?
I'm Bill Rankin.
Bill Rankin.
Here to ask Mr. Kerrigan questions, and my role tonight is to say, Bob, that's brilliant. So I'm going to see if I can do that.
Well, it's hard because you've never done that before.
No,
but it's
I'm
good
supposed
tonight.
to do it tonight.
It can be tonight. Well, you have a lot of interesting things that you shared with me at lunch and otherwise, virtually none of which I agreed with. But let's start with this. Let's start with this. The Obamacare is allowing people to be able to leave employment that they only had because they had to have health care. Mm-hmm. And now by being able to leave that employment, many of these people are going into starting their own businesses. They're spending time taking care of elderly relatives or family or whatever. And it's opened up for people a pretty wonderful opportunity where they were trapped having to work to get health care, unlike any country in the Western world but the United States. Okay, you're up.
Well, I like the way it's framed, just because they had to pay for health care. Would it be a different analysis if they had to work just to pay for food and rent?
No, I don't think so.
It'd be the same analysis,
yeah,
wouldn't
same
it?
analysis, yeah.
So in other words, if you tax the people who are successful enough to give these other people enough money so that they don't have to work, now, after Obamacare has proven a total failure, it was supposed to produce jobs, it didn't. Now it produces a loss of jobs, and we're saying, oh, isn't that wonderful? Because now people are getting freebies, and they can go and do whatever they feel like doing.
Well, let's talk about freebies.
Well, that'd be true for anybody. I mean, if you gave anybody enough money, most people would quit, and then they'd take up hobbies.
Do you think people in this country are entitled to have enough food to eat, shelter from the rain and perhaps cold, and health care? Do you think that people in this country, by virtue of being a citizen of the United States, the wealthiest country perhaps in the history of time, maybe not per capita, but in total, do you think we're entitled to that? Do you think people are entitled to that, expect that in this country?
Our rights guaranteed by the government are political rights. If you start guaranteeing people material things, let's say somebody comes and knocks on your door and says, I don't have a house. You got a big house. We need to share. What would be wrong with the government saying, well, you got to move them into your house. They don't have any place to live. The way we're doing it now is a little different, a little more benign. You're taxed, and then the tax money goes to take care of their needs. I mean, are you really going to guarantee people a place to live? They're going to guarantee them the right to demand other people's labor.
Well, no, wait.
Somebody's got to build the house.
Let's not go to that first. Let's just start with this. Does a person in this country have a reasonable expectation that they will be able to have enough food to eat and shelter from the elements and access to a physician if they're ill? Do you think that that's an unreasonable level of expectation for any citizen in this country? Not to be in my house or your house or a house up the street that they like, but having some shelter from the elements, being able to eat enough food to maintain themselves, and to be able to have access to health care. Isn't that a pretty basic, I don't know whether it's not in the Constitution, we have political rights in the Constitution, but don't you think that's a pretty reasonable expectation, being a citizen of the United States? I
think that may depend on who you are. I know some people, got some people in my family, who pretty much refuse to work, take a lot of drugs, steal when they need to, and you're going to give them a right to demand, well, I've made a complete mess of my life. Where's my house?
All right, I've got some exceptions now. I'm going to add some exceptions. Drug dealers, thieves. I mean, maybe we should say, okay, you lost those rights.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
if you're going to make it a right, where does that right come from?
No, I said expectation was a little bit different than right. A reasonable expectation. A reasonable expectation was the question, not a right.
Most people, if they behave in a lawful manner and are diligent, I think that is a reasonable expectation. I don't think that gives them a right to demand it from others. Now, healthcare is different because as a society, we've already made the decision. We're not going to let people die of treatable diseases just because they don't have any money. But that's not going to happen. We're not going to do that. So then how do we do that? Do we do that with Obamacare, this 2,600-page amalgam of giveaways, handouts, political pork, and nonsense? Or are we going to do it some other way? That's just the description I've heard.
No, that's what I was going to say. Is that somewhere written that way? Or that's just your...
Well, I'll write it down if it would help you.
No, I think I've heard something similar to that in the past. Let's just leave Obamacare for a minute. But it's such an easy target, isn't it? Because
they screwed it all up.
It's Obamacare. It's the president. It's everything people despise about the Democratic Party, the president. So it's Obamacare. Listen, it's health care. It's health care.
Well, it is
they
Obamacare.
Don't say it about Medicare.
Without Obama, this wouldn't be here. I mean, Obama decided in a time of terrible financial stress and crisis, when they had a little window when they didn't have just enough senators to cram this through without anybody being able to vote on it.
Why don't we call it the Pelosi-Reid care?
Well, that'd be all right.
Okay, I mean,
I wouldn't like it any better. I wouldn't like it any better if you called it Mother Teresa care. It's still a darn mess. Now, it addressed a need. There was a real need that was addressed by this. Yeah. Some people are better off. Some of those people who are better off are legitimate needy. Other people who are better off could afford health care. They were paying for themselves, and now they're going to get government health care that you're helping to pay for. It's not necessarily good.
Helping pay for. But what about the idea that people now are not trapped in jobs that they didn't like and they didn't want to work, and other people really wanted those jobs, but they had to keep those jobs so they could maintain enough money to pay for their health care. Now, they've got some options.
Most people are trapped in jobs they don't like, and they're working just because they need the money. They need to pay the rent and their car payments. And
but I was talking about working solely to have enough money to pay for your health care. And there are many people in this country, they work because of benefits. We know that. I mean, they work for nominal wages.
These people who are working only because they need health care, how are they getting food? Well, who's paying for that?
In many cases, these are spouses. They're other people, family members. They all kind of pitch in together. It's kind of the way people live now. I mean, everybody's pitching in to make it. But I'm saying where people are working primarily to have health care and benefits, and now they're free to try something else, go into business by themselves.
Another way to look at that is, here are people who are capable of paying for their own health care, and you're saying, well, they don't feel like it. Let's pay for it for them so they can start a hobby business and raise tulips or something.
You see how hard this is? I mean, this is not easy. Really? This is very difficult. And I'm so tired of people saying, Mr. Rankin makes so much sense. I'm just tired of it. By the way, we had... Let's say this, we don't want to mischaracterize this, of the emails, well, that's even a mischaracterization, actually. We had a very favorable email, and I've had some comments from some people, and it's all been quite favorable. We
didn't have a single unfavorable email this time.
Not a single unfavorable. That's the way it should have been stated. See, Bill's a master at taking the same data and saying it in this artful way. Not a single negative comment. You see how clever that was? And here I am stumbling around trying to admit we got one email.
Now we get to this. I love this, and I've said this to everybody. I started with my wife this morning, who couldn't care less, but I just love this. We all know that one of the tenets of Pelosi Care, whatever you want to call it, the Patient Protective and Affordable Care Act, another one of these newspeak misnomers. Yeah. So the individual mandates still exist. They're putting off all the other mandates. The individual mandate still exists as of like now, I think. So
after 1st of March, I think
unless you're poor,
yeah.
And if you're poor, you get a pass. But if you're not poor, you have to have health insurance, or you pay a penalty. Now, it's been called a penalty. It's been called a tax. Here's what the IRS calls it. I love this. What is it? I forgot what it is. It is shared responsibility payment.
Yes.
It's the shared response. Now, doesn't that make you feel better?
Well, it's eloquent.
Isn't it? Whoever wrote that
it's grand.
is
grand.
a cut above the usual government work.
It's grand.
Shared responsibility. All those words are so nice for sharing. We're responsible, and we have to have health care that includes a lot of stuff we don't want, but.
All right, I'm going to change the subject.
It's just the wording. I just love the wording.
Yes.
You know,
Sharing.
changing a penalty, which sounds like, ouch, you're hitting me. I'm sharing responsibility.
Well, I think it's nice.
It is nice.
It's a nice way to have people participate.
It's a great way to put it, yeah.
It's your opportunity to participate.
It's an opportunity to participate.
Do you think the current weather pattern we have is supportive of global warming, or does it tend to discount the global warming theory?
I don't think either one in the short term, but I do think that since all the predictions of global warming, you know, the big predictors of global warming's gone. It's climate change now.
Climate change.
Yeah. And the memo went out, and certainly all the public radio stations got it because they don't call it global warming anymore.
They don't.
But
climate change.
These predictions included all kinds of things, like the Antarctic ice would melt, not just the Arctic. Antarctic ice would melt. Yeah. The temperature would go up at a certain rate.
It's still there.
All of these predictions. We've got way more. Historical levels of Antarctic ice. All of these predictions are, even the IPCC has now admitted that there's been a pause.
Is that the Irish Politicians Club?
Yeah. The International Panel on Climate Change, sponsored by the UN. Now, they don't have an agenda at all.
No, they don't.
The UN. They're not about getting all the money they can from rich countries and handing it to themselves and other countries. And the whole way this is done. Anyway, you got all of these predictions that have proven wrong. Now, that doesn't mean that overall we don't have a problem with man-made carbon emissions. I mean, you know, I will agree with Charles Krauthammer. Yeah. Putting billions of tons of crap into the air probably isn't good. You know, but what's the effect?
So the weather the weather we're having now is not supportive of global.
I don't think it's
climate change.
Certainly not supportive of climate change.
I'm very surprised.
Does it disprove climate change? No, I don't think so. But
you're neutral on
the climate change proponents are now saying, "Oh, this proves it too." Yeah. If this were the warmest winter on record, what do you think they'd be saying? The warmest winter on record. Hang those deniers. They're causing us a lot of trouble.
Nail their lips shut.
Nail them up. Don't let them speak. In fact, that actually goes on. Don't let the deniers speak. I've seen an article on that.
Yeah. No, they're trying to quiet the deniers because the deniers are getting in the way of people understanding climate change. And I think there's a fair position that we ought to quiet those people down, however we could quiet them down.
But here's the point. Whatever you think about it, now, I don't know what's going to happen 50 years from now. I really doubt that these white-coated propagandists understand it either, because they've been wrong so far just for a few years.
Many times they are wrong. Yeah, the predictors tend to be wrong on predictions.
Now, but what do you hear from the politicians? The screeching and gnashing of teeth about climate change is getting more strident. That empty suit Kerry went to Indonesia. Here's an interesting.
Are you referring to the Secretary of State?
Our distinguished Secretary of State.
I just wondered.
John Kerry.
Yes.
The guy who kept his boat in Rhode Island. Did that give him a smaller carbon footprint or less taxes? Or maybe both.
I don't know. I think that's kind of anecdotal things that really don't support.
It's not anecdotal. He really had it there. So he flies in some enormous jet using more carbon than any 14 million Indonesians use in a year to go lecture them. And here's what he said.
Would you want to take a boat? What'd you want him to do?
Maybe a little plane. Maybe Skype it in. You know, because what he had to say was a bunch of nonsense anyway. So just phone that in. That'd be cheap. Okay. Wouldn't need a bunch of bodyguards.
So you're not in favor of the Secretary of State's efforts to convince other countries to curtail their carbon emissions.
That is this enormous problem, and we need to deal with it instantly. It's such an enormous problem that President Obama cannot wait for Congress. Can't wait for Congress. I'm going to take it over myself, and we're going to have one branch of government that rules all, which is a definition of tyranny, by the way. And I'm going to take care of it with my pen and my phone.
Is there anything that that Congress could do that would be done in any timetable at all? I mean, why would anybody wait for Congress to do anything?
Well, let's look at
if you have executive power, why don't you use
it? Well, he doesn't have executive power.
Well,
he just makes up executive power.
That's the debate. All right, we're going to leave this for a second, okay? I want to go to something else. I want to ask you about this. This is fairly serious, that these pharmacies that are concocting this mix to kill people, you know, the lethal injection stuff. the pharmacies, they don't want anybody to know they're doing it.
Well, I wouldn't either.
And the manufacturers of phenobarbital or whatever that stuff is, the primary one, and there's others. Florida uses another one now. They're under tremendous pressure internationally to shut it down, not to do it. What do you think's going to happen to it? I mean, right now, I think that, you know, what does the state of Florida do? They go to some back alley and meet some guy with a hat and a trench coat and tell him to give us a bunch of drugs? What do
there
they,
has been some talk about going back to firing squads and electric chairs, but I don't see that happening. I mean, there's a reason we went away from those things, and those reasons are still valid. It may be, you know, because we have very few executions in this country, even in Florida and Texas. I mean, compared to what? The number of murders, the number of people on death row.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying we have a lot of executions.
Nationwide we don't. In some states we have a fair enough.
Florida and Texas leading the way. I think we've had 14 under Governor Scott,
people off.
I think, so far.
Yeah. But compared to murder convictions, that's a pretty minuscule rate.
It's a smaller number.
So we are knocking off, and generally speaking, these people who are being executed, it's kind of hard to miss them. I mean, their crimes are horrendous, so I'm not wringing my hands over them. But we're going through all of this trauma and trouble to execute so few people, and we know that our judicial system has the capacity to be wrong, and maybe it's time to consider life in prison, which is pretty horrible and cheaper probably than execution.
Story in the New York Times about a guy that died on death row, not from being executed, before he was vindicated, before he was exonerated. There can be no greater evidence of the failure of a justice system to take somebody's life.
Well, you know, we've got a justice system that's good, I think, doesn't make too many mistakes. But there are a lot of protections for defendants. Is it perfect? Of course not.
Isn't it grossly disproportionate against minorities? I mean, we all pretty much accept that.
I think statistically it is.
Yeah. And it says it doesn't say the right thing about this country, that we accept that you are much more likely to get the death penalty if you're a minority.
We're killing people to prove that killing people is wrong.
Right.
There's something, you know, intentionally putting a live human being to death is pretty distasteful. Although in Florida and Texas, I think the majority of people are for it.
We're one of the few countries in the world it's universally outlawed in Europe.
And look at the countries who do it. Countries you do not want to be aligned with.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah. Well, so what do you think?
Iran.
What do you think about
North Korea.
Should we do away with it?
If people really want it, if they feel some sense of retribution or something about it, if they feel there's something good about it, I wouldn't foreclose their right to have it. If it was up to me personally, if I had to vote for it, I'd vote against it. And we've been involved in this for a long time, talking about the death penalty and debating the death penalty. There are arguments for it, but I think if it were up to me, if I had a vote about it, I'd vote against it. I think on balance, you know, there's so many murders and so few people who suffer that ultimate punishment. That kind of suggests that it's wrong.
Of course, the cost, the economics of it are overwhelmingly against the death penalty because of the cost of administering it. But I've always felt that if people were kept alive, that we might discover with those people at some point in time a demonstrable brain defect of some kind, some kind of an explanation, whether it is genetic or whatever it is, that we can start to deal with to prevent people from committing crimes, maybe. I don't know. It's probably very naive.
I suspect that putting people in prison for life with no possibility of parole, that sounds more horrible than the death penalty to me. You know, I mean, it's not like they're getting off.
No.
Being caged up the rest of your life and you'll never get out.
Never get out.
Oh,
well, we're going to come back and try to go on a little lighter note. We're going to come back here in a few minutes, and we're going to talk about some local issues. We have a comment or two coming along about the Chamber of Commerce and Rush Limbaugh and tearing blankets off of poor people on benches and making them freeze to death for our entertainment and a lot of other.
And don't forget Party Down.
And Party Down. We have some Party Down info. We'll be back here in just a minute.
For over 30 years, we've had the privilege to live and work in this great community. Kerrigan, Estes, Rankin, McLeod, and Thompson, representing accident victims across Northwest Florida.
Oh la la, oh la la, quick is la.
Ladysmith Black Mambazo in concert, March 21st at the Maddie Kelly Arts Center. Tickets and details are at WUWF.org.
Oh la la, quick.
All right, welcome back and party down. Mr. Rankin, you have an observation about this decadent activity that we need to encourage the citizens to view and see and encourage tourism and that sort of thing? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, looking at the little bit I know, which is what I read in the PNJ this morning and on a website, it may be effective in encouraging tourism. I mean, these people use it. Plus, there's an immediate economic benefit. And it may encourage tourism if you see nice scenes of Pensacola Beach and fun bars and stuff. And then you balance against that, I guess the substance of the show is vulgar behavior. But our popular culture is always vulgar. And, I think we're to separate those things out.
Would you like to ask me, for example, what knowledge I have about this?
What knowledge do you have of it?
Well, I'm glad. Thank you for
that.
Yeah, well,
because I don't have much.
I thought you'd picked up on that a little bit better.
What my position is, you never have to have a lot of knowledge to have opinions. That's what I like about this show. Well, but you have actual knowledge.
I have some,
which we need to hear.
Well, we have a house on Pensacola Beach that I own with a couple of other people, and it's a big house, and we rent it to families, and we have for years and years. And so the real estate agent called and said that our house had been selected as the site for a movie, and that the people that were going to shoot this movie or film or whatever it was, a TV series, wanted our house, and were offering a very attractive...
A premium.
Well, they called it a premium, I'm not so sure, but they were offering a lot of money to us. And I said, well, tell me about this organization.
Is this the one I'm involved in where I didn't get a vote?
No, this is a different one.
Oh, okay.
In fact, that was interesting. No, because I wouldn't have asked you anyway about it.
No, it works better that way. I understand.
Because you don't need to know.
Kind of the Obama principle, and I know it.
You're on a need-to-know basis on most of these investments that we have. But on this one, you're not involved. Okay. So they told me about it, and I said, they sent a form that we, as the owner of the house, we had to sign their agreement to use our house. And there was a lot of fine print in this document. And so once I found out about it, I said, they can get another house on the beach because we're not going to do this. And we're not going to participate in it when I found out what a bunch of decadent crap it was.
So this was because of the immoral behavior of the participants in this show? It's apparently a reality show somewhat like Jersey Shore, and they have a bunch of young people who, according to one review of it that I read, is they just got completely drunk and behaved miserably. Then the next morning they didn't remember anybody else's name, and they introduced themselves to each other, and that was kind of what the show was about.
Well, you did.
Nothing you'd want to encourage your children to do. You asked
me, though, I think your question
was your reason for turning it down that was the immoral and decadent behavior, or they're going to tear up your house?
No, it was the rent.
Oh, well.
So, I thought it'd be
for enough rent.
Yeah,
go for it.
If that had been a big rent number, I don't say, hey, listen, no, it's a movie.
Hey, this is America.
It's a movie. They have a right to make whatever movie they want.
People will watch anything, won't they?
They will watch anything.
It's just amazing the stuff that people will watch on TV.
Well, the biggest problem with television is there's too much to watch.
Right.
There's too many
channels. Too many hours to fill.
Sometimes, if I'm trying to pick a movie on Netflix, it takes me about 30 minutes. I'm just worn out. I got to read every little description of all the movies, and I got to go back to them, and I got to how many stars. Then if I start the movie and I don't like it, and then last night I'm watching something, and the Netflix went down because
you're streaming.
Well, yeah, Netflix is fabulous. Netflix is fabulous. But it takes me all this time. There's 1,000 channels. 1,000 channels.
It's amazing.
And people are watching us right now. Doesn't that make
that's the most astonishing thing of all.
That's the single
Really?
most astonishing thing that I've just given to you. Okay, I told you we were going to talk about some local things, and I think you have some.
So what do you think? I mean, they'll find somebody else's house to rent. You think it's good for the community, or it's just something disgusting?
Nah, I think it's just, you know, the usual trash, and we don't have to participate. And what we're trying to do is bring families to this community, and in all seriousness, this doesn't encourage that. It doesn't encourage people to have weddings on the beach and things like that. If you've got this sort of program going on, I mean, it's up to them. They want to do it if they want to. But it's not it's not like giving high fives because we've landed the movie crew. Come on, you know, it's not.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, with these, you know, when someone says to me, I'm going to use your property, and I'll pay you for it, but you need to sign this agreement for me to use your property. It's like this is all turned around.
Well, it depends on what's in the
agreement.
agreement.
How about you sign my agreement to use a property, okay?
That's usually the way it is.
That's usually the way it is. And one of the little nips in this thing was they rented it, we're going to rent it for 2 months, but they were only going to pay for the weeks they actually used it. See, so they tie it up for 2 months. Yeah. And then maybe use it for 2 or 3 weeks. Whatever it was, I didn't like it. I told the real estate guy, run away from this, do not do it. But I mean, primarily, it's that we just don't need to participate in that. It's not good for our community. You know, we don't need to do that. And I'm proud of the people on the beach told them, hell no, you're not going to use our property. And I think there are others that did it, too, on the beach.
Well, the News Journal suggested that they, you know, they were going to sign people up and they were going to do it here.
I have no doubt they'll do it.
Now, you know, what effect it has on tourism and stuff? Do people separate the nice pictures of the beach from the, you know, disturbing, immoral conduct of the participants?
I don't know if they do.
I don't know that they don't. I mean, listen, we've had spring break out here. We used to live on the beach, and we had this house across from us that was rented to spring breakers, and they would stack the beer cans in the windows, and by the time they were gone, they had this whole enormous window completely stacked with beer cans. It was all right with me.
Well, kids coming for spring break and whatever, you know, kids are going to be kids. And if they come here and they drink beer and they're all walking on the beach as opposed to driving, you know, it's probably contained chaos, okay? But the idea of this being a film destination for this kind of stuff, I don't know. I just didn't like it. I didn't think it sounded good. All right, I want to go to another subject.
Okay.
Okay. I want to talk about conflicts of interest. And I want you to explain, if you would, for public officials, public figures, elected officials. What does it mean when someone says a conflict of interest should prevent you from voting on a particular measure? Well, how would you describe that for the lay people watching this program might be unfamiliar with that concept of conflict of interest?
Well, okay, a conflict of interest is divided loyalties, where you have an obligation, let's say, to the taxpayers, and then you may personally benefit from whatever's going on. I mean, so there, it may be that your obligation to the taxpayers is kind of overshadowed by the fact that you're going to make a few bucks on it. That's
pretty basic.
That's a conflict of interest.
Pretty
where
basic, yeah.
what you're supposed to do for a client or somebody you've got, especially a fiduciary relationship with, is compromised, or could be. A conflict of interest includes the appearance.
Yes.
Maybe the thing is so good you'd have voted for it no matter what. But you're benefiting more than the average public is benefiting, that they're going to use your property to build this or something.
So you
got to stay out of it.
What should a public official do if it appears there's a conflict? What is the obligation of the public official in terms of disclosure?
Disclose it, not only not vote, but don't be lobbying everybody and trading favors in the background to see that it happens, and you can say, I didn't vote for it, which is what goes on in Congress all the time.
But on a local basis, where you have city council people, county commissioners, they're making a decision to allocate or to award public assets to a company or a business or whatever. And some of the commissioners, some of the city council members, they know the people that are going to have the benefit of this. So how do you handle that?
How do you avoid that on a local level? I mean, if you're in the city council and you've been living in this city a long time and you're active in business or in community affairs, and then some of these names that we see in the paper all the time are proposing something, and you know them and you're friendly with them, that's kind of tough, because it's such a small community.
Yes.
At least if you take the movers and the shakers, you know, the people whose names appear in the paper, the people who can get things done politically. There are just not that many of them, and you're going to know them.
Wouldn't a good solution to that be a full disclosure?
Absolutely.
And you say, I've known this person for 20 years. They've been involved in 6 projects in our city which have been spectacular successes, and I intend to vote for this project, but on that basis alone, that I know them, I respect them, I think they are good business people, etc. But isn't that different from someone who says, I'm going to vote for this person because they're my friend and we're in a civic club together. We're in the same club together, and this person is my friend, and I can't vote against my friend, so my friend is going to get public assets on a competitive basis over someone else.
I mean, if it's somebody, it depends on how close the friendship is.
Shouldn't that disclosure be made?
Yeah, the disclosure should be made.
This is the level of our friendship, this is what we do.
And if the level of the friendship is such that it's really, you know, there's really a conflict there. I mean, there's an internal conflict. You really don't want to vote against your friend, then you shouldn't vote at all.
Once you mentioned that this person is a friend and you can't vote against them, aren't you obligated then to explain, what is this friendship? Is it financial? Are you in deals together? Are relatives of yours working for this person? Whatever the basis of the friendship is, the public needs to know, is my point, Bill. Doesn't the public need to know?
If you say this person's a friend of mine, I have to recuse myself.
No, but let's just say you say this person's a friend of mine and I'm not going to vote against their interests, I'm going to vote for their interests, but you don't disclose what the friendship is. You don't tell anybody. You just say it's my friend. Shouldn't do it. Yeah, I think.
Because it reeks of double dealing. You know, maybe it's good for the city, but maybe it isn't. Maybe that interest is overshadowed by the fact that you want to do something for your friend who will probably do something for you later, which is kind of the way it works locally.
If we are to restore public confidence in public officials, there has to be disclosure. Public officials have to go overboard explaining what interests they are protecting or awarding based upon these relationships. They just have to do it. Even in a small community, they just have to do it. And if it's, as Bill just said, if it's the point where that conflict means that you are doing something for a friend that you wouldn't do for another person. Yeah. You're doing it because they're your friend.
Then you've misused your office.
Then you've misused your office. Then you're not fit for public office, and you should be removed from public office. And
here is the solution.
Yeah.
Anytime, if you're passing laws, if you're passing a general law, we drive on the right side rather than the left side, and you know you don't know who's going to be burdened or benefit by that. It's just a law that applies to everybody, and you don't know how it's going to come out. It's just a law. There's a purity to it. But if you know exactly who's going to benefit, then you cannot be unbiased. Then you're biased. Now, maybe that's unavoidable, but really what we ought to have are things that are self-executing. If people meet this standard, or we have a bidding process. You know, I mean, if a lot of what goes on is, well, these people bid less, but we had some other factors to consider. That's very dangerous.
It is.
If you just have a bidding process, it's pretty easy to figure out this number's bigger than this number, so you win. That's what we ought to do more and more of, rather than saying, well, they offered more money, but they weren't going to plant any tulips, so I kind of voted for the other guy, who I happen to have known for 30 years, which is local politics in a nutshell, seems to me.
Well, it's dangerous, and it's exactly what we've experienced at the airport.
Yes.
With the airport concession lease, and I have to disclose that I advise the mayor from time to time and have on this issue. What is right? Was the bidding done correctly? And in this case, I won't argue the legal position of the city or the mayor or anybody else, but to say that this has been discussed, but some points of it have not been discussed. And one of the points that hasn't been discussed is the difference in revenue. That is, that the losing bidders were paying over the aggregate of the 10-year lease about $1 million less. But more important than that was the amount of revenue that would support for bonded debt so that you can borrow money so you can improve the airport. And the flip side of it is, if you don't have the money coming in, if you don't get the money from the concession people, you have to get it from the customers, because the airlines are not going to pay more or charge less for tickets because you're giving away whatever you're giving away. They're going to make up that revenue loss in some way. I mean, the airport's going to make it up in some way.
What people want the city to do is weigh some ephemeral advantage of using local people, and how heavy do you weigh it? And there's no standard for that. That is really dangerous. Why not say, anybody who's going to pay all this money is going to run a good operation because they're paying this money whether they get the revenue or not, and just put it on, that's the fair way to do it. Just put it on a bid basis, not insiders or local people. And sometimes the local people aren't all that local. They pretend to be local, but they really don't have anything to do with the city. They live over in Gulf Breeze.
Well, many of those people did live in Gulf Breeze, but the two main competitors were two national companies. It's just that the locals had a piece of one of the national companies' financial interest in it. But the public never really understood it, because it was always presented like, well, gosh, you should support local businesses. So what you should say, you should support local business, but I'm not willing to pay $10 more per airline ticket. Are you kidding me? I got to pay for that? No, you give them what you want to give them, but I'm not paying. Well, somebody has to pay, period. Somebody has to make it up.
Support local business by making government as lean as possible so we have low taxes, so that our laws are enforced fairly, so that our environmental rules are executed fairly. And local businesses would do fine. You want to support local business? Go to that restaurant. But not favoritism. Not favoring them in contracts. Not somebody else bids more, but they get it anyway because it's good for local business. That to me is a very dangerous and to the point of being abhorrent.
Well, for example, this university follows strict standards on bidding, and they don't engage in doing favors for people with taxpayers' assets. They don't do it. This university runs, Dr. Bentz runs a tight ship. This thing is run correctly. It's the way government should be run. It shouldn't be bending to do favors for friends, because what's really happening here is favors for friends is taking money from the taxpayers. That's what's really going on, and giving it to other people. That's not how government should work. Well, we all know there's some of that in government. Okay, there is some. And there are cases in which subjective criteria could be used. We prefer this flower maker over this flower shop because of their artistic ability, whatever the criteria is. But where you have a bid that has been fairly performed and the loser didn't appeal, what are we talking about? What message are we sending to the entire, worldwide community? No, you can't do business with these people, because if you bid and you participate fairly, you're not going to get it. You're going to lose out.
We want rules where you don't know the outcome, and the rules are fair. That's the only way to do it.
Well, if you want to move into a competitive environment where we are competing with other cities of our size or other destinations or whatever, the reputation you want is Pensacola, Escambia County, Destin, all across the Gulf Coast. They run a tight ship. It's fair. They have the most beautiful beaches maybe in the country, certainly the top 2 or 3 in the country. They have good local governments. They have responsible people, and they don't do a lot of home cooking and screwing around with public assets. That's the message you want to send.
Do we have that reputation? Do you think that among people who might move their business here, we have the reputation?
I think we have a good reputation.
Do you?
I do. I genuinely think we do. But I think we can lose it. I think we're doing so many good things in Escambia County, with not only with this university, but with our businesses downtown. It's really, things are picking up all across the Gulf Coast. It's really fabulous. We just have to curtail reverting to the way things were done here 30, 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
It just old time stuff.
We need politicians who will stand up. I think generally the mayor does that.
The mayor
He'll
does it.
stand up to the
Lumen
pressure
May,
from
our
the local
commissioners.
people.
We've got good people on Grover and other people. I think we've got some great leadership. I don't start naming some and don't name the rest, which we will before the program's over. But we have good leadership in the community, and it's really doing well. And I think we are headed in the right direction. But this local yokel stuff is really bad business and can hurt us.
It is.
Yeah.
And certainly in the past, there's been way too much of that.
Way too much
Oh,
of
the
it.
same local boys always get the deal. Why even bother? Yeah.
We'll be back with more following this message. I'm going to ask Bill about the fact checker from the Washington Post on 7 million people are signed up for Medicaid and Obamacare. Mr. Rankin thinks that may be slightly in error. Anyway, we have some other national and local stuff. We'll be back here in a minute.
Oh la la, oh la la, quick is la.
Ladysmith Black Mambazo in concert, March 21st at the Maddie Kelly Arts Center. Tickets and details are at WUWF.org.
Oh la la, quick.
We're back.
We're back.
Yeah.
I didn't notice it.
That's all right. That's all right.
This is my fault.
Are you okay?
Hey, welcome
Are you
back.
awake?
Oh, listen, I'm good for at least another 5 minutes. We're back within reason. Bob Kerrigan and Bill Rankin. We're talking about whatever we feel like talking about. There are always all kinds of great issues. We've got an interesting local issue with a lot of controversy, and that is the fish hatchery. What's going on there?
Well, the fish hatchery is a great concept. I think we're just enormous economic benefit for our community if the mayor and others can get this thing done. But there are people who say, well, it's probably not the best location for it. They're talking about the waterfront
Well, let me
location.
interrupt you. Dr. Rick Harper from the university, who I suspect a lot of people respect him as much as I do, he said this isn't the best use of the property.
Well, I think Dr. Harper was misquoted. I really do. I think that the News Journal account was not an accurate account of what he said. And we'll ask Rick. Yeah, we'll ask Rick himself what
I've got his
he
email.
said.
I can send him an email and ask him.
But, it's kind of, if you think about it, it's like fish. I have an analogy for this, okay?
Oh, good.
Yeah. Fish, when they try to mate, like fish are trying to mate, they get this huge area, right? I mean, they're out in the ocean and stuff. I mean, in big rivers.
That's why they make so many eggs.
They can't, but then they can't find their mates very well. There's a really big problem. In a hatchery, okay, from the time they're babies, they grow up in this enclosed environment. And it's kind of like a dating situation almost. I mean, not exactly, but I mean, they end up, it's sort of like Christian mingle, okay, for fish.
So the birth rate's pretty high in a hatchery.
Very high, yeah, it's very high. And so they all start growing up together, and there's a little incest, I mean, unfortunately, in that environment. But anyway, these fish are released, okay, and they're already set up, they're already mated up. And so you have this tremendous contribution of new fish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that bad?
No.
I mean,
no.
They're going to be like the kings that were the product of incest who.
I don't know what fish will look like, okay, in this environment. I'm just saying these are some things that I've been thinking about. Yeah.
Is there any support for that anywhere? Anybody who thinks that's a good idea? that there's going to be too much inbreeding among the fish, and we'll get fish who look like armchairs or something? I'm having a hard time with this.
Well, I thought that you would pick up on that scientifically and reinforce.
I don't know.
And reinforce this.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought the way fish mated was they just had eggs all over the place, and then then the sperm just got shot all over the place, and if it finds each other, they do. And I don't know. And then if you're going to release them to the wild, then there ought to be more interbreeding. You would think. And
where did you learn about fish? I mean, you seem to have a lot of knowledge about this. And where did you?
That was kind of pretty basic stuff. I don't know much more than that, really. About.
Well, are you?
Am I wrong about the way fish mate?
Well, I don't want to embarrass you about this, but let me ask. What do you think about the hatchery? What do you...
I don't know enough to know. I mean, there are strong reasons either way, you know?
There's no strong reason against it. It's just the location. I mean, you know, no, it's not even strong. Well, the environmentalists say that, I don't know what they say. There are, you know, there always...
Well, there's some people who say that introducing all of these fish into this environment is going to hurt the efforts people have made to have seagrasses around the downtown area out in the bay. Have you heard that?
I
don't know if that's
do you think
true
anybody
or not,
knows anything more about this than you and I do in this conversation?
Well, let's hope so.
Which proves to be inane beyond
Well, you wanted to
any
have
level.
this conversation. I didn't bring this up because I wouldn't have brought it up because I don't know much about
But you
the
asked me
hatchery,
about
really.
the hatchery, I thought. I mean,
Well, you
that's
asked me to ask you.
I asked
So
you.
I did. Yeah.
I forgot
Let's
that.
move along.
Okay, I thought that. I didn't know that. All right, I want to go back to
But
the...
yeah, I know there's something you know a lot about.
Yeah,
We're running out of time.
Yeah.
We want to do local stuff. The Chamber of Commerce is in the news because they want to get public money, but they have a little problem with the Sunshine Act. And if you get public money, then you got to conduct all your business in what's called the Sunshine laws, and you can't keep people out of the meetings, and you got to have records and notice and all that stuff. You got any views on any
Well,
of
I
this?
feel bad for the chamber for a variety of reasons. I think that they really are trying to find their niche wherever it is. This is interesting to me, and it's troubling to me that I believe this is correct, that there are only 2 chambers in Florida in which there are insufficient members to support the organization financially. And those other 2, I think there's a total of 3, have to have government money. But that's pretty typical of Pensacola. It's everybody is in the cheese line for money. So if you want a viable chamber that is independent of the Sunshine and is thriving and it's got to be somewhat reorganized, I think, from the way it is. And it has to be defined. Somebody wrote this, an interesting response on one of these blogs saying, we've got like 7 or 8 chamber of commerces within 50 miles of each other. It's like, we need one concerted effort of some kind. And it's easy to say this and harder to do. But the point is for the chamber, I don't think that what Jerry Maygarden said is entirely correct. The people are leaving the chamber because of the Sunshine. I think people are not in the chamber because the organization does not reflect the long-term best interest of the business, the greater business community. Otherwise, people would be dying to join. And if they're dying to join the chamber, you have enough money to function, and you tell the government, goodbye, we don't want your money.
I thought the chamber was getting government money for the promotion of tourism.
Well, they have gotten it for the promotion of tourism in the past. And then the question is...
Do they get money just for operations, or do you just think some of that money goes for operations and staff and...
Well, they have now separated out tourism. Okay, but I think there's still a supplement of some kind. The city has a supplement, and the county has a supplement
to the chamber.
Just to the chamber, yes. And I don't know what those numbers are. We can get those numbers, but that's been the problem. And I think that's what Jerry Maygarden was saying was, well, if we have to be in the Sunshine, we're losing members. But my view is, if you are flooded with members and people who are supportive of the organization, then you don't need government money of any kind. And I don't think the chamber people ought to be running this tourism thing. I mean, that's a separate deal. But truthfully, I think it ought to go back to government. We elect people to look out for our money as taxpayers. Why aren't they running this?
The problem we have around here, something we've talked about a lot, is we have these government functions that get passed off, and the responsibility gets diluted. The Santa Rosa Island Authority, the Downtown Improvement Board. These are governmental functions. Why doesn't the government do it? They don't hire somebody to run parking and run gallery night and all that stuff, rather than having a very highly paid executive director.
Well, we've talked about this on this program in years past, that it's just we have an excessive compulsion to form governments here, that contrary to all of the conservative politicians, we have government on top of government on top of how many places have a government for utilities?
Right.
What?
Right.
We have a government for a piece of the community they call the island. We have a government for the downtown. We have a government. We have
people in this defined downtown pay a couple extra mills.
They do.
To run the Downtown Improvement Board. I guess it benefits some of them.
They pay an extra 2 mills. But the idea of having all these governments, and particularly in the greater Escambia County area, is just wacky. especially in a community with politicians who are talking all the time about less government.
Yeah.
And not one of them says, well, let's do away with these frigging governments and get this under the control of administrators that work for our elected officials. I mean, and I'll tell you why these governments form, in my opinion. These governments form because the people who want chips and deals from government, if you've got 20 governments, then you can go to a meeting and nobody shows up because the press reporter won't be there because he's got to go to 7 other meetings. And so you get all your deals done by these little governments. And that's what's happened here through the years, is all these deals have been made. City council deals, county deals, island authority deals. All these deals have been made because you don't have the watchdog press there, because it's just diluted because of all these responsibilities.
And the responsibility is certainly diluted, and the politicians appoint these people, and who owes who what. And
well, some of them, I mean, some of the appointments, I mean, for example, underneath all of these governments, they have committees. And these committees make decisions that are extremely important, okay? And nobody shows up at these committee meetings. I mean, we've got one we're looking at right now where it's pitiful what they're doing. And they're doing favors for their friends in these committees. We need less. Here, I'm the liberal, right? We need less government.
Right.
We need less government. Why can't we get local government people to say, you're right, do away with this, do away with this, do away with that? They created the utility authority. They created a government. They created the Island Authority. They created the Downtown Improvement Board. They create all these governments. And it's not advancing the greater development of the community. And I think, truthfully, if you look at communities on either side of us, all the way over to Destin, say, and all the way over to Gulf Shores, we're isolated as a backwoods kind of held back area. We just haven't advanced. Somebody needs to start asking why. Why hasn't this place advanced? Why is it mired in the past and in the mud? And I think it's because of all of the inside deals that have been made here for years with these local governments.
What chills and retards any society is that instead of the rule of law, you have the rule of status. And that's plagued us for too long, I think.
It has. I want to ask you about Rush Limbaugh, because he is a very intelligent person. And I think talk radio appeals to the extreme right wing for a reason. And I'm interested in
and why not the extreme left wing? I mean, they've made attempts to get left wing radio started, and it's flopped every time.
And you know why?
I don't know why.
I have the reason.
Good.
Okay.
What is it?
Here's the reason. The reason is the left is never emphatically correct in their position. They're wishy-washy, they're liberals, they see both sides, they're kind of smiling and happy, they don't take a stand. The right wing, no good. Obama's a communist. The country's going to hell. And so you have the segment of society. It's just as many people on the left as are on the right in this country. It's split down the middle. But the reason talk radio appeals, I think, to this core, this far-right core, is because they're dead right certain and everybody else is dead dung wrong, and you don't have it on the left. There's no radio announcement.
Aren't there things that the left is very doctrinaire about?
But like what?
I mean, well, like support of the LGBT community.
Yeah, but you know what they say? We want everybody to be happy. We want our transvestites to be happy. We want these people to be happy. We want the homosexuals to be happy. And let's not forget our lesbian sisters. Oh, okay, fine. What's next? On the other side, on the right-wing side, they're screaming about laws and you got a right to reject service and you kick these people out and God doesn't like homosexuals. I mean, that's the right position, okay? I'm just saying the left is soft. In New York, the left is soft, okay?
The new mayor, de Blasio, has an enormous constituency for fixing this problem of the rich getting everything. They go, this is the plantation. The rich pay all the taxes. And all those taxes filter down to people who are less rich, but they're just upset about it. And we got 2 New Yorks, and we're going to fix that somehow. what a recipe for disaster.
I
I
agree.
love New York,
I think
and I think de Blasio is a New York's been well run for 20 years. Whatever you think of Nanny Bloomberg.
I'm delighted to have your opinion about this, but it had nothing to do with what I was talking about, which was right-wing talk radio and the emphaticness of the right wing.
There is a group of left-wingers who are very emphatic about what they want.
Okay, but
they're pro-union, they're pro-distribution.
But my point is, the
pro-taxes.
reason it doesn't work on talk radio, in my opinion, is, yes, there are a couple of issues. Yes, they're in favor of unions, but they're not emphatically correct. They don't have God on their side, and they don't have the constitutional. I was on radio yesterday, and people said, but I'm a constitutionalist. I don't know what the hell it is. I haven't even read it. I'm a constitutionalist, and they're dead right, and they're pounding their fists. And just like in the election with Bush. Remember down there, Republicans down there in South Florida had their nose up against the glass. They're screaming, and they're hollering, they're clawing like animals, okay? The Democrats are out in the hall drinking cocktails saying, I hope this all turns out.
I don't know. I think there are a lot of doctrinaire, strident liberals.
The reason talk radio works is because of that. I'm telling you, that's why talk radio works.
Right-wing talk radio works.
There's no left-wing talk radio.
Talk radio has always bombed. In fact, even they had extreme left-wing talk radio, WBAI. It was just astonishing. I mean, they were outright Marxists. They didn't believe in profit. They didn't believe in the free market. I mean, they were just a bunch of wackos. And that survived in New York for quite a while, which is kind of a left-wing place. And I'm not sure, I don't think that died.
But nationally,
nationally,
let me take another quick cut at the talk show people. Glenn Beck he's just so upset, and the country's this, and the country's going to hell, and then is it? Now let me talk to you about investing in gold.
Yeah.
Glenn, you were so adamant, and you had me so emotional. I was really on the edge of my seat, and now you want some cash for gold. By the way, all those talk show idiots selling gold. Boom.
Gold.
And the little old ladies sending their money in because they knew it was a hedge against something.
You know
the advertisers.
from the history of gold, it's boom and bust. And
advertisers on talk radio appeal to the lowest common denominator. You look about, I want to talk to you about this lady. This is a talk radio commercial. This is classic. This is Janet Lehman and her husband Frank. Okay, now they say that they've been behavioral therapists for 30 years, and they have a son, little Johnny. And Johnny said, "I hate you, mother. I can't stand you. You're rotten. You're no good." And he swears, and he's all this, and he's awful. So Janet and her husband, who've been therapists for 20 years before little Johnny went on to right, they write a book, How to Prevent Your Child from
turning out like our kid.
Turning out like our kid. But we've been advising people for 20 years because we're, quote, behavioral therapists, and God knows what that means. I don't think it has a definition. It's like they make it up. Yeah. They're selling the daylights out of it because everybody's got a kid or had one to talk like that.
We are awash in self-help books. And
that's right. Little Johnny, I hate you. I hate you. I can't stand you. If you're tired of this kind of disrespect, you know what would be good, though? Be great. I don't think it'd sell like a hotcake if you had one for a spouse. Okay, if your spouse is disrespectful, treat you like here, read this book.
It just needs to be easy, The 10 guaranteed tips, these easy techniques, which will fill in the blanks, make you rich, attract the opposite, say whatever you want. Yeah. You won't be fat anymore. So there's a miracle berry that's going to keep you from being fat, even if you eat 18 pounds of them a day.
And one of them said, don't eat too many because you'll lose weight too fast.
You'll lose too much weight.
It's like the erection that lasts 4 hours. There's certain things that are
be careful about that. This product's going to work too well. Better be worried about it.
All right, this is Within Reason. Bob Kerrigan and Bill Rankin, and we're here once a week at this time, wherever you're watching it, however you're seeing it. It will be at that same spot the next week. And we'll be back in a week talking about local issues and some national issues. You can email us. That's been on the screen, or call us and give us your thoughts. And again, what was it? Received no negative emails.
Not a one.
We're very proud of that. All right,
that'll change.
We'll see you next week, and thanks for watching.
For over 30 years, we've had the privilege to live and work in this great community. Kerrigan, Estes, Rankin, McLeod, and Thompson, representing accident victims across Northwest Florida.